All right, welcome back, guys. So today, this module is going to discuss supplementation for hypertrophy. All right, so what are we going to go over this entire module? I'm going to teach you about the most effective supplements to enhance your hypertrophy journey, right? So we're going to break down what to look for in these supplements that I recommend, which are multivitamins, fish oil, creatine monohydrate, and any sleep support formula. Right, so we're going to learn how each of these supplements works to boost performance, recovery, joint health, and muscle growth so you could train harder, recover faster, and see better results. So these are all backed by science and simplified for results. Let's get to it. All right, so the first supplement that we're going to talk about today are multivitamins. So the problem with most multivitamins on the shelf is they use low bioavailability ingredients like folic acid, which is anything that says oxide after the actual ingredient. So most multivitamins in the grocery store are a victim of this. They'll use low bioavailability ingredients and they'll use low doses of them. So that's why you see these multivitamins in the store that are so much cheaper, but they're less effective because they don't absorb as much. So you're not getting as much of the actual nutrient, right? So they're also packed with unnecessary fillers and synthetics. So just you'll see a multivitamin with a laundry list of ingredients, and most of these ingredients aren't doing anything to benefit your health at all. So the result, you get poor absorption, so less of each mineral, and then that in turn has little impact on your performance or your recovery. You're just flushing money down the toilet, in my opinion, right? But what do we actually look for in a quality multivitamin, right? So any kind of B vitamin that's methylated, you'll see the label right after the B vitamin. It'll basically have some sort of label that indicates that it's methylated. And then any kind of magnesium that isn't oxide. So glycinate or citrate are the best ones, are the highest in absorbability. And magnesium specifically helps you with sleep, recovery, nerve function. It also plays a big part in your testosterone regulation. Same with zinc. And zinc also helps you with your immune functions and enzyme activities, all, pivotal for recovery. Vitamin D3 and K2. These D3 specifically helps with testosterone, and both D3 and K2 help with bone health, hormones, and immune support. And then any kind of 5-MTHF, which is an active form used in cellular repair. So anything with folate is going to be, integral for recovery. And most grocery store vitamins don't have this. So how does this help with specifically building muscle? So it fills certain nutrient gaps during high energy expenditure. So obviously, you still want most of your micronutrients to come from your diet, but you're not going to be perfect every day. These micro nutrient multivitamins help kind of fill those gaps on anything you might have missed. And then it also supports your hormonal balance and energy production. So vitamin B12 helps convert that food into energy, and in turn it helps enhance your immunity and your recovery, right? So the multivitamins also help optimize your internal function during the growth phase. So by internal function, we mean specifically your brain health, your heart health, and your joint health. And fish oil also does this as well. So when you stack a fish oil with a multivitamin, you're really getting a lot of under the hood support. It's nothing you're going to notice as far as your gains or your size, but as far as function and being able to perform consistently, they do make a decent difference. That's why I recommend them. All right. So how do we even take these in the first place to maximize their effectiveness? You're going to want to take them with either your first meal or your largest meal. That way you have some sort of consistency in a 24-hour period. Take them for the same time every day, right? And avoid taking it on a empty stomach, because B vitamins might cause nausea and low absorption, because the B vitamins kind of feed off the food and turn that into energy. So on an empty stomach, it's just not as effective. The nausea I wouldn't worry too much about. I haven't had that experience personally. And then pairing it with dietary fat helps enhance absorption. So any kind of fat source does boost absorption rates for these multivitamins by, a decent amount, just to consider, right? So who would I even recommend taking one? So obviously everybody training in the gym. So ideally we're going to be training 3+ days per week. If you're on a restricted or a repetitive diet, so you're lacking in certain micronutrients, this would also be great to somewhat make up for them. And then obviously as you sweat heavy, you don't just lose electrolytes, but you also sweat out zinc and magnesium. So these multivitamins help replenish your zinc and magnesium stores. And then obviously specifically for our program, we're performing weightlifting and any kind of physically demanding movement, really does benefit from having these multivitamins as a supplement. Next supplement we're going to talk about is fish oil, how it pertains to recovery and joint health. Let's get to it. So why do omega-3s matter for muscle growth? So it helps with inflammation control. So it helps regulate training-induced inflammation. The less inflammation you have and the faster it heals, the faster recovery you have, right? Joint support. Joint support is key. You want to lubricate your joints, and it reduces stiffness and pain as a result. So it makes your movements just much more comfortable to execute and reduces the risk of any kind of joint stiffness that might hinder your training. And then there's also cognitive benefits to it. So the mental game is really important, on a fitness journey. So DHA, which is one of the omega-3s in a fish oil, it boosts brain health, memory, and focus. So these are all super important in not just, the weightlifting environment, but in your day-to-day life. And it also provides hormonal support. So it improves your insulin sensitivity, supports your testosterone by reducing chronic inflammation. The less inflammation you have, the harder your body has to expend energy to make up for it, and the more your testosterone can be regulated. It's just one of the little factors. So what are we going to look for in a quality fish oil so you don't buy the wrong one? Well, you want some sort of re-esterified triglyceride. There'll be an RTG label, and that has the highest absorption rate, okay? And then dosage, you want to shoot between 2,000 and 3,000 milligrams of combined EPA and DHA daily. So there will be a lot of fish oils out there that, you'll see a high omega count, but it has a low EPA DHA count. So that means it's a much cheaper, less absorbable form of fish oil, and you're not getting all the benefits. So you want to make sure that when you add up the EPA and the DHA, you're getting about 2,000 to 3,000 at least. And you don't need much more than 3,000, obviously. And then for purity, you can look for any kind of other certifications or third-party testing to make sure there aren't any heavy metals and the oxidation going on when the fish is extracted, for the fish oils. Because, there are lots of cases with these cheaper fish oils where, they don't put as much time and resources into extracting the harmful ailments that could be in these fish oil supplements. So that's something you want to look for. Absolutely. So again, we just discussed this, but some red flags to look out for is, these just 1,000 milligram fish oil, which has no context of containing any kind of EPA or DHA. So you'll see it say 1,000 milligrams and you're thinking, okay, it's 1,000 EPA DHA, but in reality, it's only about a third of that, right? But if you look at the label, and I'll show you a label in a sec, you'll be able to see the difference. So low doses omega-3s. So store-bought brands and, fish oil gummies are really guilty of this, especially the fish oil gummies. Obviously, I love taking anything in gummy form, but with supplements, they just are much lower in absorption, and you end up having to eat like 5 servings just to get the same amount, and it's most likely lower quality anyways. And again, no mentioning of these third-party testing or quality certifications means higher probability of a, less clean supplement, which we don't want. So this is a difference between two fish oils. If you take a look, you can see which one's the good one and which one is not the good one. So obviously on the left, big red flag, 400 milligrams of fish oil. No mention of omega-3s except for the bottom tab, only 57 milligrams, okay, between the two. That is just absolutely terrible. You're spending probably $10, $15, $20 on this. You got 45 servings, and you're only getting 57. It's a fraction of what you actually need, and it doesn't even tell you how much of EPA or DHA are there. So it's most likely, mostly EPA and almost no DHA, which is where all the mental benefits come from anyways. And we'll take over here on the right, the Real Science Athletics O3 Prime, which is my absolute favorite fish oil right now. You could see 1,240 milligrams of omega-3s, which is just enough, honestly. So 680 milligrams and 450 of DHA. So I personally think, even though I did say, 2,000 to 3,000 is good, I think 1,200 is the perfect starting point if you're not, if you're consuming some fatty fish on the side. If you're not consuming any fatty fish at all, and you are experiencing some sort of hindrance in your joint health and your brain health and your heart health, besides the other factors that could play into that, yes, you could supplement with 2 to 3,000, and obviously that might help you more. But in the case of most healthy people, I really do think 1,200 is more than enough. So, who should use fish oil? Again, anybody trading with medium to high intensity at least 3 times a week. So, this is what we recommended our program. Anyone dealing with joint stiffness or soreness, this will help with recovery. And then, if you're not getting that serving of 2 to 3 fatty fish servings a week, this might help, supplement your omega 3s. So, to take away from all of this, fish oil is more than just heart health. It's a recovery optimizer. So it not just enhances muscle repair, it supports your joint longevity and it sharpens your mental focus. So make sure you choose the quality sources, based on the tips I gave you, dose consistently, and make it part of your daily routine. Now I'm going to talk about creatine and how it helps with strength and muscle volume. So why does creatine work? Research shows it is the most proven cost-effective supplement for anybody trying to gain muscle. It regenerates ATP, which is an energy-carrying molecule. That's the primary fuel for these short, intense efforts that you use while lifting weights. So in turn, it allows harder training, heavier lifting, and many more reps. It leads to greater muscle and strength gains over time, but it's not a steroid-like supplement where you're just going to add 10, 15, 20 pounds on your bench. These are marginal effects, but for the price, it is absolutely worth it. If you can just be a few percent better for next to nothing, why not? And especially when it's proven and the side effects just aren't there. We'll go over those in a second. So the key effects of creatine, so it helps with strength and your power output. It helps enhance your muscle volume through cellular hydration. That's how you get that more full look in your muscles. People confuse it for bloating, but the water is stored in the actual muscle, around the muscle, not in your fat stores. So it gives your muscles that bigger, more full look to a certain point. Some people are creatine non-responders, but for the most point, it does help everybody just a little bit. So in turn, it helps increase your lean body mass with that cellular hydration. And then it does slightly improve recovery between sets and sessions. And it supports brain and neurological health, as studies show. So how do we use it? You want to aim for about 5 grams daily and take it anytime with mix it with anything. You don't have to mix it with water. You can mix it with whatever you want. As long as you're just, consuming the entire 5 grams, then you're good to go. So my favorite form is any kind of micronized or 200 mesh creatine. That means it's broken down in the smallest form possible and it mixes better, and you don't get that disgusting aftertaste. So there's no need to load or cycle. A lot of guys, they do a loading phase where they eat, they take 20 grams a day for a few days, and that way they have 2 weeks saturation in a few days' time. I personally, like I said, since the effects are so little, there's really no reason to rush getting to full saturation. Once you're at full saturation with that 5 grams a day, you're good to go. You can miss a day and it's not going to be the end of the world. You don't need to make up for it the next day. Once you're at that full saturation, you can stay there. So here's some myths to go over that, are very common in the fitness industry. People say that it causes bloating, but it's only intracellular water. So that's not water as far as your fat stores. That helps with muscle fullness specifically. It doesn't damage your kidneys. There are no evidence of harm in healthy users. You don't need to cycle it. You can stay on it long term, and there are no negative side effects. And then the hair loss one is the biggest myth that I've seen, but there are multiple studies that show that between multiple groups, there was no evidence of hair loss. And these are multiple studies. So in conclusion, creatine is safe, effective, and affordable. It should be a daily staple for serious lifters and athletes, and I think you're leaving gains on the table if you're not supplementing with it. So next module, we're going to go over sleep support and what I recommend for that. So for our last chapter of this module, we're going to discuss sleep supplements and how they help with recovery and hormonal health. So why does sleep outside of the supplements matter for your gains? So testosterone production actually peaks during the deep sleep, and then you experience growth hormone secretion that spikes early in the night to drive recovery. So the muscle has the resources to grow because of the growth hormone secretion. And sleep plays a huge, huge factor into that. And then it also helps with cognitive function, right? I mean, this is common sense. You have poor sleep, It's less focus, bad decision making, your training falls off, your mindset falls off. It's just a huge slippery slope that you don't want to experience. And then mood and motivation, this plays into the cognitive function. So sleep deprivation increases cortisol. That leads to more stress. Stress has a direct effect on your physical health, and then it also could impact your cravings when you're making poor decisions, and that could hinder your diet in many ways. So, besides the supplements, what can we do to build a solid foundation of base before we just start adding these supplements, thinking they're going to be a magic pill? So, obviously, screens at night, blue light does delay melatonin production. So, you could use a blue light filter. I use one right now called Flux, and it basically, I give it my sleep schedule, and then it times the decrease of blue light as the day goes on. So by the time it's nighttime and I'm still on my computer, it's basically shut off all the blue light, so I could go to sleep without having to wind down as much, and I can get some work done later in the day, which I like to do. And then obviously caffeine late in the day is something you don't want to avoid. Is something you want to avoid because it could stay active for 6 to 8 hours in your system, sometimes longer if you're on a heavier dose. And if you're taking it, if you're drinking pre-workout before dinner and going to the gym after, you might be up all night. I mean, if you have a hard time winding down, this could impact you. It really depends for everybody, but I would just recommend capping it off in the middle of the day, depending on what your schedule is like. And then obviously, since caffeine does boost mental stimulation, it causes stress and overthinking. That delays deep sleep. So once we have our sleep in check, what can we take to further support it? So again, magnesium. A lot of multivitamins have magnesium in them, but I'm actually supplementing with additional magnesium on top of my multivitamin just so I can get that full 400 milligrams a day. That doesn't really put you to sleep, but it helps the quality of your sleep. So even if you're running off 6 or 7 hours instead of 8 or 9, you're getting the same quality of sleep and you're in deep sleep for longer. And then L-theanine, this is actually paired with a lot of pre-workouts as well. So it helps with the caffeine high. You could optionally take it on its own outside of your pre-workout. It helps calm the nervous system, so that helps put you to sleep a little bit faster. It helps you stay asleep. And then obviously our body thrives off of lowering its temperature to fall asleep. So glycine does somewhat help lower your core temperature. That keeps you asleep longer. Melatonin. So melatonin is something I recommend in the short term if you really need it to kind of kickstart your sleep schedule. But the main factor of your sleep should be all the parameters around it. And then if those are in place, you should be able to fall asleep on your own without melatonin. So I would only recommend melatonin as like a short-term solution in certain cases. I wouldn't rely on it at all. It's not something you want to get, it's not something you want to just regularly take for the rest of your life. I think you should create the conditions for your body to produce melatonin on its own, right? And then ashwagandha is also a good one. Lowers cortisol, so that's the hormone that creates stress, which in turn helps improve your resilience to stress. I think it's a great supplement to cycle on and off. I've heard, some stories about people experiencing, cycles of apathy for, taking too many doses of it, but I've yet to experience that myself. I think if you take a healthy dose in the short term, it's not going to have the biggest effect on you. And if it does, you can always cycle off of it. So a good checklist to take into account to kind of get your sleep in check is going to bed and waking up at the same time. In today's day and age, we're all over the place. We want to have some sort of consistency to build a base off of. And I think our sleep and wake times are a good way to start with that. So having a cool, dark, and screen-free room. So keeping electronics, not falling asleep with the TV on. This will help put you to sleep faster. And then sleeping in a cooler room will also do that as well. So having a wind down before you go to bed, instead of just trying to force yourself to sleep when you're not as tired, it kind of going into another room and then, having breath work sessions, journaling, stretching, meditation, just letting yourself cool down on your own. And that way, when you are ready to sleep, you'll just fall asleep. And then obviously I don't recommend training really hard at night before bed or having big meals late, because this will keep you up and, you don't want to be trying to digest food while you're trying to go to sleep. It's just not comfortable. It's not sustainable. And then I recommend all my clients, I set them up with a app called Pillow, and that helps your sleep tracker, monitor trends. You can, also get a sleep watch like Whoop that has an app attached to it. That way, technology is getting better with monitoring your REM sleep and your sleep habits. And when you can monitor something, you can manage it much more easily than if you weren't. So, in conclusion, sleep is a non-negotiable for anybody looking to pack on muscle. If you don't have the recovery, you can't make the gains. So it also boosts performance, mental clarity, and hormonal balance. These all play a huge factor into gaining muscle. But the main thing to take away from this entire module, supplements are tools, but your routine and your diet are the foundation, right? So treat sleep like training, intention and consistency. Same with your diet. You should be tracking your sleep the same way I taught you to track your diets and your workouts. If you do all this, you basically have the holy trinity for success. All you have to work on now is your mindset, which I will discuss in a later module. I'll catch you guys in the next chapter.